Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. I post every week about growing cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without a greenhouse, without grow lights, without a humidifier or heat mats. It's either indoors or outdoors or it's out of the pool. So if that sounds familiar in terms of your growing conditions, do hit subscribe. I post every week, and if you like this video, hit like. Why not? And this week, plant lovers, as promised, following my Holcoglossum video a few weeks ago, Exhibit A, realizing how easy it was for me to grow in my environment and how suitable they are for my environment, I have, as promised, developed a slight obsession and bought some more. And they have all arrived, and I thought, why not? Let's share it with the world. And here we are. So I've got 3 new plants, and I thought I'm going to go through them one by one, explain what I'm going to do with them, repot them or not, and generally welcome them into my world. So as you might have seen if you watched a previous video, this is Holcoglossum kimbalianum, and as you can see, the flowers are just on the turn. Still giving you an idea of the beauty of the flowers though. So this baby is just about to go back outside where it lives. But as it proved so successful and the flowers are so gorgeous and it was really low maintenance and just seems to love Melbourne like the best of us, I thought, let's explore the family a little bit more. So let's put Holcoglossum to the side because that is going outside where it belongs, and let's go through these one by one. Okay, maybe the first cab off the rank will be this, which does look like a fast food package. So this baby is Holcoglossum subulifolium, and funnily enough, it's actually a parent of one of the hybrids that I've got here, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this is a species orchid, not in the foil, which means that it is a flower and a plant as it's found in the wild. And this comes from pretty much the same reason as kimbalianum, and I'll drop in the footage of my wonderful atlas work showing you exactly where that is. And similarly, quite high altitude. So this is described as a cold to cool grower, which means it should do very well in my climate. So first observation is obviously it's arrived in this foil. I haven't unwrapped it yet, so I'm not sure what lurks beneath. But I am a little disappointed. I'll come in closer and show you that leaf has had a bit of damage. It's either been chewed off or it's, I don't know, something's happening to it. Anyway, so why don't we have a look at this one more closely? I'll unwrap it and then I'm going to repot it and show you basically what I'm going to be doing with this one. All right, plant lovers, I am keen to just see what might lie within this package. Let's have a look. Foil. Sphagnum moss. Okie doke, and that's falling off quite easily. Oh, that looks like a little plantlet there. Look at that. How interesting. There's a little baby plant coming up. Well, that looks a little bruised, that root, but it still feels firm. Well, good news is then, all the roots are tickety-boo. That doesn't, that one is, I think, useless. I might snip that off. But there we are. That is quite a healthy plant. And by the looks of it, from this part here, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this was a division, not a seedling. So it's quite a large plant, which means it could even be flowering size. How exciting. I'm just going to re-sterilize my scissors and snip off this dead root, and then we're going to repot. All right, so I'm just going to snip off that root there, which just looks a little bit done for. There we go. All right, quite a large plant and some nice healthy roots. But what I'm most excited about is this little plantlet coming up here. Tremendous. All right, let's go on to potting. Now then, Holcoglossums are epiphytes and they live clinging to the bark of trees. And they dry very quickly, so although they're in a cold environment, the water is draining away from them very quickly, so they're not staying particularly damp and cold at the same time. So what I'm going to use here is a mix of the very largest pieces of bark that I have, some pumice stone, which is a sort of a naturally occurring rock, some sphagnum moss, and a little bit of perlite. So basically extremely aerated. The sphagnum moss is just to retain a little moisture, because I do allow these to dry out quite a bit between each watering. So with this particular plant, which has got some quite generous roots, I'm going to use a reasonably large pot. As we know, plant lovers, I am a terracotta pot kind of guy, and I think that is just going to go in there quite nicely. And if we look at Kimberlianum, which I potted a year or so ago, not dissimilar in that we have that small plantlet coming out of the base, and it's the same size pot and not a dissimilar size plant. So I'm basically going to echo what I did before. All right, so we have our wonderful plants, and I am going to be putting in some pumice first, some large bark, a little bit of perlite, a little bit of sphagnum, a little bit more bark. So incredibly light. A bit more pumice, and then sit that root there, hold the plant up, a little bit more pumice, and a little bit more bark. There we go. A little bit more perlite, a little bit more sphagnum. And then just before we top it up and finish it, my secret ingredient, a couple of granules of a slow release fertilizer, like that. And my other secret ingredient, a few little sprinkles of mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizal fungi develop a symbiotic relationship with the roots of the plant and help it extract all the nutrients from the medium that it's in. So a little bit more bark, just around there. There we are. And a little bit around here. And there we go. Just making sure I don't bury that little plantlet that wants to come out. So very loose, and I haven't packed that down at all. Now, the next most important thing, this orchid didn't come with a tag, so I must write one for it now with my waterproof pencil. There's the name, and I'm just going to put the date here, which is June 22. There we go, just so that I know the date that I potted it up. And there we have our potted Holcoglossum. All right, the next cab off the rank is this very healthy looking plant, and this is Holcoglossum lingulatum. There we go. Now, always curious about the names. Lingulatum, so lingua often means tongue, and latus means side. So I wonder if this has got side tongue when it blooms. Who knows? What a strange thing. Anyway, this is again a species, which means this is as the plant occurs in the wild, and this one is a Chinese species, so it's only found in those southern parts of China, in the same neck of the woods as the others, but just a bit further north, so not in those southern countries, just in China. Now here's the curious thing, plant lovers. I would assume, receiving this, that it was a seedling that had been deflasked and grown on a little bit in sphagnum moss. But look, can you see here? I'll show you on that side. Look, that to me looks suspiciously like a spent flower spike, which is quite amazing, given that this is such a small plant that really is a dead flower spike. So this is flowering size. Who would have thought? I'm thrilled. And it's described as flowering in autumn and winter, and there's still a little bit of green left in that flower spike. So I would have thought then, yes, it's probably flowered earlier in the autumn season, as we're now in the very early winter here in Australia. So interesting. Now this one comes from slightly lower altitudes than the other two that we just looked at, which means it is described as a cool grower, not cold, but nonetheless I'm giving it the same conditions, which is outside with the rest of them. Okay, let's have a closer look at this one and repot it. All right, let's look at our Holcoglossum lingulatum, and as I said, this appeared to be a seedling in sphagnum moss, but as you can see here, there is what does look to be very much like a spent flower spike, which is quite amazing, isn't it? Okay, let's just gently squeeze it out of this pot and see what is going on. Ooh, there we are. So very, very tight sphagnum to start with. Look at all those new roots though, oh my goodness. Oh, there we are, that was very easy. So you can see very easily how monopodial it is, just developing one sort of stem, I suppose, with the leaves coming off the side. In wonderful condition. Goodness me, look at those wonderful roots. Okie doke. Let us now repot this baby. And given that it's a little smaller, I'm going to be using this small terracotta pot where it will fit reasonably well. So let's bring back our materials. All right, here's our pot, and again a little bit of pumice. The pumice stone also just helps weight the pot down because there's very little in here, so they do get quite light. A bit of perlite, a little bit of sphagnum, not too much. There we go. A bit more bark, and then a few grains of our secret ingredient, slow release fertilizer, literally just a few. There we go. And then a dash of mycorrhizal fungi, there we go. And then we are just going to place our plant on there. A bit more bark, a little more sphagnum, and then just some more bark around the top, just to weigh all that down. So, not tapping it down, not pushing it down at all, very, very light. And then those roots will just basically work their way through all that light and aerated medium. And there we are. So there is our very, very happy Holcoglossum lingulatum. And I might just write the date on this tag as well, which will be very, very practical of me. And then the last cab off the rank is a hybrid. You can already see the vigor of that. And this is a hybrid between Holcoglossum subulifolium, which is our foil encased friend, and Vanda coerulescens. There you go, there's the tag for that. Now that Vanda is one of the cooler growing Vandas. It grows in quite higher altitudes as well as lower altitudes, so it's described as a cool to warm grower. And the other species parent, this Holcoglossum, is a cold cool grower. So putting 6 and 7 together to get 34, we can assume that this one, this hybrid offspring, is going to deal with my climate. But plant lovers, I've just received it and it's not in bad condition, but I'll come in and show you. The leaves, the older leaves are a little bit damaged, and as you can see here, this leaf is very damaged. It probably just got snapped off or bent off in transit. So I have made, plant lovers, an executive decision with this one, which is not to repot it just now. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, we are just going into winter, so we've got another 3 months of cold, wet, miserable weather here in Melbourne. So although it'll be undercover and it won't be getting wet, it will be getting cold. Now this came from a grower on eBay and it came from a warmer part of the country, so it's not particularly acclimatized to Melbourne. So I feel like I need to give it a good Aussie go, a whole year basically, to acclimatize to my climate. So for this winter, I'm going to keep it indoors, and then in spring, I'll put it outside, and then I will hang it where the others are, and it can gradually acclimatize itself. I will keep it downstairs though, and if you watched my grow space video, it will be downstairs at the bottom of the stairs where it's cooler, much cooler at night than up here, but it does get bright ambient light. So it's kind of like a hospital holding pattern. It's quite an unusual hybrid to find. The Vanda parent has a beautiful bluish tinge to the flowers, and the species Holcoglossum, that one, is pure white. And so when they're combined, it is the most beautiful sort of lilac-y blue flower. So I really don't want to risk losing it because it's quite hard to find here anyway, and not inexpensive. So one of the great tragedies is, I'm just taking off this offensive clippy thing here, is that it is growing, as you can see, in this basket. And what you can probably also see is that the roots are very healthy, but very firmly attached to that. So to repot it would mean soaking it for quite some time to loosen the roots and the natural adhesive that orchids produce and other plants do as well, which makes them stick, which is amazing. I need to loosen that in not warm or hard to describe, but room temperature that's slightly warmer anyway, not cold water, but not obviously piping hot because you'll shock the roots. But anyway, warmish water. I need to soak it for quite some time. And again, the weather is just a bit at the moment. We're in a bit of a cold snap. So I wouldn't want to get water into any of these leaf joints and perhaps encourage fungus or bacterial growth or whatever. So plant lovers, really all I'm going to do with this one is snip off this leaf, which is damaged and it's already browning at the sort of crease where it was broken. So what I'm going to do then is just sit it in a dish of pebbles so that it's the roots aren't sitting in any water. Water it, let it drain, let it dry out, but basically keep it indoors until the weather warms up, which is going to be 3 months. And then I will repot it into a terracotta pot with equally large pieces of bark. So what I'm just going to do with this one, first of all, is get my fabulous Chinese scissors, which I know you all love and which I'm afraid I don't have any contact for because I bought them in Shanghai 3 years ago, and they're beautiful. They do have Chinese characters there, which might be a manufacturer's name, which perhaps you could search if you were keen. They come from a fantastic old family business that's been around since the 17th century making metalware. Amazing. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. What I am going to do though is just use some rubbing alcohol to sterilize these scissors. This is a fabulously precious orchid, and who knows what filth these scissors have seen and might transmit, or who knows where this baby's been. May have been having a wild old time in the post. So we just put a little bit of rubbing alcohol, cleans our scissors. I don't know why I have to say that in a German accent, but I think rubbing alcohol sounds very Germanic. All right. And then I'm just going to snip off this leaf without trying to do too much damage. There we go. Now, never the best thing to do, but it was quite damaged. So there are also these sort of brownish marks on the orchid. So yeah, I just want to keep my eye on it. As I said, it came from a warmer part of town. It's particularly cold at the moment and it came in the post. So I'm just wondering if it's got a little bit of cold stress. So definitely going to keep it warm, and I am just going to give it a bit of a dousing with a seaweed based solution, highly diluted, which is really a tonic, not a fertilizer. And I feel if something has sort of been traumatized through the post, that is the best thing to do. So for this one, plant lovers, this is our hybrid, which is absolutely beautiful. I am not going to do anything except water it and then put it in a dish with some pebbles to drain it, and then just leave it. It's going to be in bright indirect light and it's going to be warmer at night, and we'll just see how it goes. There we are, plant lovers. Here are my 2 Holcoglossum species and Holcoglossum hybrid, which does look like the poor cousin, doesn't it? They're all beautifully potted in terracotta, and this poor baby's got to stay in its plastic basket. Anyway, it's for your own good. I just want to keep my eye on that indoors and make sure that everything is tickety-boo. Okay, so all that remains for me to do now is to give them a watering, and I always water everything that I've just repotted with a diluted solution of a seaweed-based tonic. Essentially, it's not a fertilizer, it's a tonic, just to help them settle in. Now, Holcoglossums I leave to dry out between each watering. Not an orchid though that you want to let dry out for a long period of time. As you can see, it's got no pseudobulbs. It's used to frequent amounts of water and rain, but it's used to drying out thoroughly between each sort of downpour, as it were. So if you imagine it's clinging to the bark of a tree in quite high elevations in those areas that we looked at. Rain running, rain hitting it, drying out, evaporating really quickly, and nothing there. So there's no leaf mulch, leaf matter, nothing for it to sort of draw any other moisture from apart from the bark of the tree. So drenching, drying, but no drought. So saying, some of the areas they grow in do have not so much a dry season, but a drier winter. And logically, here in Australia, I do tend to water things less in winter because it is cold here in Melbourne of a winter's evening. So I naturally will water these less in winter and more in summer, which is their active growing season. So that kind of makes logical sense. Okay, so here's my very scientific measurement of sea salt, the seaweed solution, which I use for newly potted and newly arrived plants. And it is, plant lovers, that much. Not much at all. Then we decant into a more charming watering can like thus, and there we go. So here's our Holcoglossum subulifolium, and I am just going to give it a very good drenching. You see it is all running out. There we are, and then I will just leave that to dry and drain for a little bit. And then here is our sibling Holcoglossum lingulatum. There we go. Let that drain. And then I'm just going to give our hybrid cousin a good dousing as well. All of these roots, there we are. Let that dry out thoroughly before I put it in a dish with some pebbles. And then the last thing to do, and I have exhibit A, are these miracle little pot hangers that I found on eBay. Now, if you just Google plant hanger or plant stand on eBay or Amazon or wherever else you want to have a look, you will probably find these, or any orchid supplier that you might get bark from if you get them online. And the pot just sits in there, you kind of squish it in, and then using those hooks, you can hang it up. And if you remember where I have hung Holcoglossum kimbalianum, it is on a lattice fence, so these little hooks are perfect for hanging these sorts of orchids on, which needs lots of air movement, a bit of elevation and quite bright light. So perfect. I was so happy to have discovered those. And they also have a sort of a longer legged cousin. So there is a sort of a hanging implement with a hook, which means you can do the same thing. So you just pop the plant pot in there and you hang it up, and there you go. So it's going to get plenty of air movement, plenty of sun, and very movable and easy to deal with. And you can get these in a variety of diameters. So there you go, handy hint from me, number however many. There we are, plant lovers. I hope you have enjoyed our Holcoglossum repots and no repotting and kind of unboxing, but removing from its foil package. I am so excited to have all these orchids, and I'm so excited that this one is, I think, a flowering size, and that this one, which I assumed was a seedling which would take years to mature, has flowered. So the only kind of missing link is this one, which again looks to me as though it could well be, come its first growing season, old enough to bloom, big enough to bloom. So there we go. Hopefully next time, plant lovers, I can do a video about all of these in bloom. But anyway, for now, from me and my new Holcoglossums, I am signing out. Looking forward very much to seeing you next week with another extraordinary story of my amateurish stumblings through the forest of growing cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne in Australia. So until then, take care, and I'll see you next week.